The format for today's call, what we're going to do is have our panelists speak. So they're going to do a small presentation, 10 to 15 minutes each. We'll run through. And we've kind of stepped those through the process of volunteers. So first we'll have Kathy speaking about recruitment. Anna will speak about management, and then Susan will follow up with retention. So I would like to thank the three of them for joining us. We had the bios in our e-news, so I'll let them introduce themselves as we go through and maybe give a quick part of their bio just to give you a background of where they're coming from with the information. And what we'll try to do is hold off on questions till the end. So we'll set up into a panel format afterwards, and you can ask questions, and all three can answer from their perspective what the questions might be. So Kathy, you're first up. Are you ready to go?
I'm ready.
Thank you. Great. Thank you, Kathy.
Hi, everyone. Unfortunately, I'm not able to see everyone because I'm doing this on my phone. My computer decided to not participate today, so it is what it is. I worked in the field of volunteer management for 41 years, so yes, I am very old. And I retired in 2019, but still involved in the community. I do a lot of these types of sessions pro bono for, people like Volunteer Ottawa, Canadian Wildlife Federation, for You Today and other agencies. I only have 15 minutes, so it's a Reader's Digest version of what I normally do. So I'll just get right into it. I was the volunteer specialist at the City of Ottawa for 17 years, and previous to that worked in long-term care. So first of all, I'm going to talk about, to start with in recruitment, you really need to know, what is it that you need? So don't, say, oh, just we need volunteers. Actually sit down with your team, whether it's a team of 2, a team of 5, and ask them, why do we need volunteers and where are we going to put them? And is it like, are they going to be 4-hour shifts? Are they going to be 8-hour shifts? Because that's going to dictate how many volunteers you have. So if you only need 10 volunteers, but then you decide you are only going to do a 4-hour shift, then you might need 20 volunteers. So really look at that before you start doing your recruiting. And how many do you want in each role? So if you have ticket takers I'm going to use Blues Fest as an example. Well, they have multiple gates. So you might have people coming through 3 gates. So you need 3 ticket takers. Do you need 2 at a time at each gate? Do you need 3 shifts? Do you need 6 days? So look at the big picture before you go out and recruit, because you really need to know what you need before you go out and recruit. And in order to recruit, you have to define what is it that you want from those volunteers. So you have to create a position description. So I'm going to say not a job description, but a position description, because I worked for the most part in a unionized environment. A job description implies paid. So I always use the word position description, but you guys can use whatever you want in your organization. And so basically, if I was going to come on as the new mayor, let's just, for example, and they said, hey, Kathy, you want to be a new mayor? Sure. Well, where am I going? Do I go to City Hall? Do I go to Constellation? Who am I reporting to? What day do I show up? How long are my days? Do I have an assistant? I don't have an assistant. Do I have something I have to wear a suit every day? Like it's a wide open can of worms. So what you really need to do is define it. So if you want, I'm going to give you a good example. So we had volunteers at the Junos. And one of the things that they told me to work with the VIP volunteers is, okay, so I said, what do they wear? Like the Junos, you could be wearing anything. And here's what they gave me: rock concert glam. What does that mean? What I would wear and what someone that's 26 would wear for rock concert glam would look totally different. Does it mean jeans that are ripped and shredded? Does it mean, a belly shirt? Does it mean a leather jacket? Does it mean a black dress? Does it mean a tuxedo with sparkles? Like, what does that mean? And they kept saying to me, the girl kept saying to me, but that's what it is, rock concert glam. And that was very distressing to a lot of those VIP volunteers. That might have been on TV, right? Because they wanted to look what they were supposed to look like. So we had to define that. So in your position description, you need to talk about, what is it they need to wear? Are they doing something that's involving lifting? Do they have to have steel-toed boots? Like for a festival, you could have people carrying boxes and you could have people lifting. Do they have to be able to lift 50 pounds in this particular role? So that's why it's important to have multiple position descriptions, because it could be that I don't have to do any of the lifting, but I might be around heavy equipment and someone could drop that box or drop something on my foot. So yes, my role might be a greeter, but they still want me to wear steel-toed boots. I'm making this up, right? I'm exaggerating so that you'll remember what I'm saying. The hours. So are you doing 4-hour shifts and you want them to do 3 shifts a week? If it's a festival and it's only on in the weekend, do you want them there every day? Do you want them there every other day? Is it a 7-day festival, a 12-day festival? Is it going on every weekend during the summer? Tell them what they need to know, because people are comfortable when they're confident in what they need to be doing, what they need to be wearing. Who are they reporting to? So if I'm reporting to Aldo, I'm going to use Aldo because I worked with Aldo. So poor Aldo, I'm sorry, I'm picking on you. So if I meet Aldo and he recruits me and that's the person that I have in my mind, and I'm not going to be reporting to Aldo, who am I going to be reporting to? If something happens and I have a question and I'm out at a festival gate and the person with me says, I don't know the answer to that question. We have to feel confident enough to go to somebody. So it could be the on-site supervisor that you're reporting to. It doesn't have to have a name attached. You just have to know when you get on site, Kathy McGee's your on-site supervisor, so go over there. Tomorrow, it could be Aldo Chiapa's your on-site supervisor. It doesn't have to be a name, but then again, your organization might be small. It could be a name. It could be you're reporting to Kathy McGee. If you have a problem, a question, something happens, an incident, please go to that person. Do they or don't they get to speak to the media? That's really important for most of you that are out doing festivals. The media is going to be present. So do you want them to speak to the media or you don't want them to speak to the media? So that should be a part of the position description. Perhaps you don't want someone behind the scenes speaking to the media, or do you only want the person at the gate speaking to the media? So those define within the individual position descriptions. Make it very simple. And what I'm going to do after this is I'm going to send you a blank position description. You can use it, don't use it. It just gives you a general idea of what you should include. The other thing I would suggest is in some of these chats that you all do, talk to each other, because one of you might have a really, really good template for that. And then they could share it. I can tell you that Ottawa's great with sharing things. We've all learned from each other. To this day, I always learn something new, even being in the field for 41 years. The other thing is explain to them in the interview. Now, are you going to do interviews? Are you going to do group interviews? And I can tell you, I was on a panel, and I think it was for the Ottawa Festival Network many years ago. And the lady from Blues Fest was on the panel with me. And they do group interviews because they have thousands of volunteers that come forward. And the best question I heard was, she said they had everybody in the room. I think they had 400 volunteers in the room. They had 7 leads around the room for different positions within what they wanted for volunteers. And the first question out the gate, they asked everybody, put your hand up if you are not good at saying no. And everybody looked at each other like, I don't get it. But that's the question. How many people here have a tough time saying no? And of those that put their hands up, and they said, everybody that has their hand up, you're now going with Aldo or whoever it was. You're now going with them because I don't want you as a ticket taker at the gate. Oh, I forgot, I left it in the car. I forgot to purchase the lanyard and it dropped off. And oh yeah, come in. So that was a brilliant question. And that screened people out for that position. So you can think of that for your own organization, and you could do group interviews if you have that many people. Do you want other people doing your interviews for you? Do you want like one of your staff or your volunteer group doing the interviews? And you should always have a same set of questions for each position. So I could have a different set of questions if I didn't talk to Aldo. And I decide, and Susan and Alana, we all decide that these are the questions. So no matter who interviews those volunteers, they're getting the same questions. You're going to get answers for the same questions. And that way you can screen together. Are they getting meals? They're not getting meals. That should be included in the position description, because do they bring their lunch? If they do, where are they putting it? Is there a fridge available? If there isn't, then they need to bring a cooler. All those things so that people feel confident when they come to the position. Explain to the volunteers in the interview, what is it that their position is going to bring to your organization? So for the Ottawa race weekend, all those volunteers are told, by you being a volunteer and standing at this barrier for 12 hours while people run by you, it sounds really boring, but because of you and everybody standing here around these barriers, people are qualifying for the New York Marathon. And the New York Marathon, they're making big money. And a lot of these runners are taking it back say to Africa or to wherever, and that is their money for the year to live on. So it's really, really important what you do, even though you don't see it as standing at a gate. So what do they bring to your organization? Is it a coffee festival that you're raising money to do a breakfast program in the schools? Well, I mean, I'm making all these up, right? It's fiction, but are you this coffee festival? Well, people really want to come out. You've explained what they do, but what's the value I bring? Well, by volunteers being engaged in this coffee festival, we'll be able to supply 300 children with a breakfast program for the whole year. Well, wow, that's pretty impressive. So I do want, I am part of something bigger. And it's really important that they understand where they fit. It's nice to say, I volunteer for Blues Fest, and that's great. And people get to come out, but what are they doing? Well, guess what? We were able to bring on board, 150 musicians this year. And after COVID, that's huge. And people really need to be with each other, and people are going to be able to get out and talk to each other. And because you stand at the gate, because you serve behind the bar, because all those different positions, explain to them about that. How am I doing for time? Am I doing okay? I think I have maybe 5 minutes left. Am I doing okay?
Yeah, but 3 or 4 minutes left.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going really, really quick. Sorry about that. This is like a Reader's Digest version. I'm doing the best I can.
Okay.
Records checks, and I know people don't want, this will be my last thing to say. Within your organization, are you doing records checks, different types of record checks, a vulnerable check or a police check? Are you not doing it? I guess it's dictated by what your organization chooses to do, or is it dictated by your board of directors that all volunteers must, or is it dictated that only certain positions require a police record check according to who they're going to be working with? But what I'm just going to leave you with is, remember, whatever your organization does, and if they do and don't interview, if they do or they don't have records check, the question is, what are the headlines tomorrow about your organization if something goes wrong? So that, let's say, for example, for me, if I was at the City of Ottawa and the recreation program did not screen volunteers and therefore blah, 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 blah. You can imagine how damaging that would be for the organization. So think about that. So when you're doing your interviewing, your record check, your position description, think about the whole picture. And then that's the bottom line. What are the headlines saying to more about your organization and the volunteers that you have at the front lines, because they are the face of your organization. They are the ones that are greeting your clients and the people coming through the doors and the gates. And you want to make sure that you have the right people at the gate. Oh, one more thing, sorry, one more thing. That wasn't the last thing. I was talking the other day and I was saying that sorry, it's great to see a resume. But a resume and you talking to me might be totally different, because maybe every second word out of my mouth is not a nice word, is a very rude word. So on paper, I look great, but in person, you might not want me at the front gate because of my language, my foul language. And it sounds bad, but that is a situation that really happened. So I'm just giving you another food for thought. And that's it.
Okay.
Great, thank you, Kathy. Yeah, so if you have questions for Kathy, we'll hold off till the end. Next up is Anna. So pre-COVID, used to bump into Anna probably once a week in the building here, but now we see each other virtually. But welcome, Anna, if you want to go ahead with yours.
Thank you, Lee. Yeah, my name is Anna Wood. I've actually just in mid-career, but just retired from my position at Ottawa Blues Fest and City Folk, where I was a volunteer manager for over 10 years. So I'm really excited to be on this call and to see all of you. So yeah, I moved to Ottawa in 2010 and took my first volunteer management role with the National Arts Centre, doing volunteer management with Prairie Scene when they used to do their scene festivals. And through that ended up meeting many volunteers who also volunteer for Blues Fest and many other festivals. As most of you know, there's kind of serial volunteers who festival hop and play important roles at each event. So met a great team there and ended up meeting the team with Blues Fest as well, and spent the next 10 years there. So I'm going to highlight some ideas and kind of my philosophy for how we actually manage the volunteer program, or on site at Blues Fest. So it's one of the larger programs in the city. In its peak, we had close to 4,000 volunteers. Now we're around 2,500. So we have, those numbers have come down. This past year, coming out of the pandemic, was quite challenging. So our end of day numbers were around 1,800. So we were short quite a few from what we were used to, and have definitely felt the challenge of re-engagement after the pandemic. But the thing that made the event go off is how we structure the volunteer program and the different roles that we have within the program. So there's your staff level, obviously, that are making, like Kathy was saying, those big picture decisions. What roles do you want actually staffed by a volunteer? What are the shift times? How many days? What are those positions? And mapping all of that out. The next level that I've found so integral to smooth management is to actually hire a volunteer leadership team. So at Blues Fest and City Folk, we have a leadership team of over 65 volunteers for Blues Fest. So there's a leader and an assistant for each of the volunteer areas, and they become the primary point of contact when you're planning and mapping out. They're also a primary point of contact for those general volunteers that you're recruiting, and kind of that first point of contact, which really helps you to be able to do your job in volunteer management in terms of mapping out the larger picture, mapping out the policies, making sure that, all of the logistical pieces are in place, and your leadership team is actually kind of your right-hand team of people that you can train in a bigger way. So you can provide them with more in-depth training in terms of emergency preparedness, code of conduct, conflict resolution, so that they essentially become, the strong members on the ground that can help execute the event. And like Kathy was saying in that job description, it's like, who are they reporting to? Where do they go? And establishing that confidence early on by giving them, wow, you've signed up and here's your leader and here's their email address. And it's a direct line of contact that they're going to communicate with. And then when they show up on the day, they're actually going to meet that person face to face. Makes a world of difference. And I'm sure as we get to Susan, she'll probably also tie that together and how that really can help retention in your team as well. So we have our staff team, we have our leadership team, and then we have on-site supervisors. So if you have a particularly busy area that you're trying to staff, or a remote area too, I know many of you are in festivals where, you might have 20 locations around the city. It's actually really helpful to put an on-site supervisor at those remote locations, and to think of it that, could this position be volunteer? Could this be a volunteer supervisor position where you're giving them a little bit more information and autonomy, but they can be that point of contact for you, whether it's at a venue where there's a small concert happening, or wherever your location may be in the city. And then of course your largest body will be your on-shift volunteers, so your day of volunteers. As I've mentioned, it really does, that structure really does kind of help larger events ensure that there's enough, there's enough checks and balances along the way, so that if you do have to do kind of blanket recruitment where you're not able to interview everybody and you're not able to have that one-on-one connection because you're recruiting such a large number of people, if you have the right checks and balances of supervision, points of contact, that can sometimes help mitigate if something's not quite right in the mix. So if you get somebody that comes in and they might be, not great face-to-face with somebody, you have a supervisor there that's going to catch that right away and be able to place them in another position, and it's not going to be a detriment to what you're trying to achieve. So the other piece of management is obviously training and preparedness. So we provide the most robust training to our leadership and supervisory team. So we're giving them an in-depth emergency preparedness. We give them conflict resolution training. And we're really giving them the tools so that they can be leaders in that community and be able to recognize up and coming leadership too. So, it does, again, kind of, bleeding into what Susan's probably going to say as well, is that in terms of retention, you want to have your eyes and ears in your volunteer base to see who's the next up and coming, who's going to step up into that leadership role next. So giving your leaders the tools to see that in their team of people, I think is really important. You are providing code of conduct training to all your volunteers and setting up realistic expectations that if there's a breach in that code of conduct, what's going to happen. So, you're going to lay out the general rules of what you're expecting from them, what is an absolute zero tolerance, and if that gets breached, what can they expect? Are they going to be asked to leave on the spot? Is there going to be an appeal process? And laying that all out in advance in terms of them knowing that before they even sign up for your opportunity. And then, of course, as Kathy was saying, you want to provide a guide for your shift volunteers, because the more confident they are in what to expect, the more they're going to show up for you, and the less nervous they're going to be when they get there. I certainly saw that coming out of the pandemic. We had virtual orientation sessions, and majority of the questions were just like, I'm so nervous. I'm excited. I want to see people, but I don't know where to go. And what is it going to be like? Are people friendly? And it seems simple. But I think there is this nervousness of like, I'm excited. I want to do it, but can you tell me what to expect so that, that anxiety kind of goes down and they are in turn more engaged. So providing a guide for your shift volunteers in terms of what do they need to do in advance. So they might need to complete a training session in advance. When they get on site, where are they going? When they get there, what can they expect to get? Are they getting a meal? Are they getting a t-shirt? And then who can they go to if they have questions? So in our larger community like Blues Fest, where there's thousands of volunteers in a day, we have that set up for them where there's a designated check-in spot. There's a designated volunteer welcome center, which is basically like an info booth for your volunteers. You can combine that with a volunteer lounge. Maybe it's also where they pick up their meal, but there's actually somebody there that's informed about what the next step is and can help somebody troubleshoot to get to where they need to go next. In conjunction with all of that, and a smooth, management of your event, you want to think about the human resources element of what your policies and procedures are going to be. And a lot of that, I kind of have the luxury at Blues Fest to be able to be pretty autonomous in that. Some organizations, it might be board driven, it might be staff driven in terms of, a whole staff team being people around the table to be able to decide, what are those rules and policies. But some general ones that you want to certainly keep in mind is your code of conduct. So those are like basic bottom level rules. What can you do? What can't you do? What do we expect from you? And what's a no-go? I found it quite helpful to sometimes those code of conducts get a bit jargony, like they have a bit of legalese tone to them. So if that is the case in your organization, I would suggest trying to summarize it in an informal way that reflects the tone of your organization. So with Blues Fest and City Folk, we often toned things for Blues Fest as like, here's the party, come to the party. We're excited to have you at the party. But for City Folk, it's a smaller community and it is a bit more family focused. So then the tone was a bit more gentle and it was like, we're welcoming you to be part of our folk festival family, and here's what you can expect here, and here's this cozy stop versus like, where can I get all my gear and get to the next step. So Edmonton Folk Festival has a great informal volunteer summary. Like it's available on their website. It was my dream to create one for our event. We got part of the way there. But it really does break down some of the legalese language around a code of conduct or terms and conditions, and really lays out like, what does this mean? When we say respectful communication, what does that mean? And I think that, reflecting back on what Kathy's saying, the more clear it is in terms of what the expectations of the experience are, the better volunteer you're going to get in the end. Other documentation to have ready: emergency preparedness training. So thinking about if you had to evacuate your site, where do people go? What are the steps? Who do they look to for direction? What is the chain of communication? If there's a lost child on your site, what are those steps? In terms of other resources on site, like security or first aid, making your whole volunteer base aware of the basics. And then, with those different tiers of leadership, they're going to get a bit more information in terms of how do they effectively find the person they need to find in an emergency situation, or knowing the bigger picture. If I'm getting this direction, that means this is happening. Clear expectations for perks and benefits, which Kathy spoke about as well. And then organizational policies such as accessibility training, DEI training, event policies. Maybe you have to provide SmartServe to your volunteers, and having all of those laid out in terms of the smooth and effective management. And I'll just close out just by, if you don't already have that structure in place with having, a leadership team, I'll just highlight some of the benefits of it. So inherently in your planning, you're connecting with those volunteers nice and early. You're gaining their expertise, and they might bring a different perspective to what you're planning or how you're planning it to make it even stronger. A lot of volunteers that are interested in a leadership role, they might be newly retired, they might have a wealth of experience that your organization doesn't have, they might be a student who's really excited to take on a new project or turn what they're learning academically into something that's hands-on. I just find that we have, BlueSfest has a 95% retention rate in their leadership team from pre-pandemic to now, and we couldn't have done those events without them. They are a highly engaged and very capable team of people. It also means that you have a team to rely on event day, and they end up being an extension of your overall volunteer program and festival operations. They're another group of people that can solve that problem when it first comes up, and they have the tools to be able to troubleshoot and problem solve before they're escalating it to staff who might be have their plate quite full. I think the most important role that a leadership team would play in the overall management of your volunteers is that they are a direct connection they're a direct connection for the volunteer to your event. So like I mentioned right off the top, that personal connection really does matter, and it can really make a big difference in terms of the retention and the smoothness of information, as it's a point of contact where they can ask direct questions and get a direct answer. And I can't, so many benefits there. They know how to get help when they need it. Like I said, providing a personal connection to the team, and they'll also help to create a diverse and flexible program that offers many different opportunities as well as styles of leadership. So that can help also in terms of retention. Sorry, Susan, that I'm jumping in on probably some of your topics, but a volunteer might land in info booths, realize that they don't really want to be front customer facing, but through that, they're going to get connected to another leader that might have a different leadership style or a slightly different role. And then there's still a volunteer with your organization. They've just found their place or their home, which I think is an important part of retention. And finally, if you do decide to form a leadership team, they end up mentoring and providing future leaders from your general volunteer base. So they're able to have a stronger connection than you might, because you have so much on your plate, to recognize somebody's strengths and say, hey, this person's really great. I think you'd be really great in a supervisory role, or I think you'd be really great with this backstage hospitality team. You have what it takes. And that in turn, it turns into a personal recognition as well, which I think will strengthen your volunteer body overall. I'll end it there. I don't want to go. We have a lot to jam pack in an hour.
Great, thank you, Anna. And we'll go right into Susan to pick up on retention.
Well, basically, they both did a fantastic job. So I'm just going to close out here and say, if you do everything that they tell you to do, you'll retain your volunteers, no problem. So that's all you need to do. Just do what Anna and Kathy say. All right. That was the fastest 15 minutes, and you're all very welcome. Okay. So retention. Post-COVID has really knocked the retention out of the volunteer force, and understandably for so many different reasons. Now, I'm really strong on off the cuff and talking about things I'm passionate about. And in this post-COVID, yeah, post-COVID, that's my story and I'm sticking to it. Yes, we're still with COVID, but fortunately, we're now able to be out in the public again, which is absolutely awesome. Now, that being said, what's really important is to get to know your audience. So what I did was I was fortunate enough to receive the registrants in this meeting. So I took a look at all of your sites. I wanted to get to know each one of you a little bit better before I made my presentation. And the reason for that, and this segue, is to stress the importance of getting to know your audience. Who are your people? Who are your volunteers? If you want to retain someone, you need to get to know them. You need to get to know your area leaders. I have what I call retentionisms, things that I need to always remember to do. To stop, to look, to listen. What are people doing? Sometimes it's not about what you hear, it's what you see. Sometimes you need to ask questions. But the most important thing is to never lose contact with your volunteers. From your area leaders to the general volunteers, as we call them, to your community. The better you know them, the better you're going to be in delivering the volunteer experience. And the volunteer experience is all about how our volunteers feel. At the end of the event, the most valuable thing I can hear is, I can't wait for next year. Sign me up. I'm ready to go. There's no words that I cherish more than that. It means I did good. I did right by the people. I spend most of my energy on taking care of people. And my message to you is take care of your volunteers. Get to know them. Help them. We are dealing with a new vulnerable sector called the volunteers, as Anna and Kathy have spoken to before. Coming out of lockdown has presented a whole new set of challenges to all of us. We're dealing with people who have stories that we have not yet heard. The person that we knew 2 years ago is not the person that we know today. So we have to take a step back. We have to get to know them again. We've changed, they've changed. But we're still all coming together for a mutual event that we are really looking forward to. So how do we address those things? What do we do? Well, you take a deep breath and you get to know your people. You find out what are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? How can you help? Do you need transit? Is there something I can do for you? There's a show on TV that starts with, how can I help? If every area leader took a moment to ask their volunteer, how can I help? What an impact that would have. Sometimes it's not all about do this and do that. It's more a case of, you're doing okay. Are you enjoying yourself? We're having a good time? If you normally want to create a sense of community, and we all want to belong to something. First, we have to go back and ask, why did that volunteer choose us? What was it about us that made them choose us with all the other things in Ottawa that they can participate in? Why did they choose us? Well, they chose it because of many reasons. So now it's our responsibility to prove to them that they made the right choice. And then hopefully many of us are involved in quite a few other events. We take them with us. I have a footprint in Ottawa that spreads 20 years, and I'm sorry, I should have introduced myself. Hi. I'm a pathological volunteer, and I have a 20-year footprint in Ottawa in so many different events. I've volunteer coordinated one of the events that's represented here today. I've volunteered in many of the event participants here today. So I've been with a lot of you already, and I've never met any of you, but I know your events. I know that retention is extremely difficult. I know that some of the challenges that you have in that if you're part of the festival network and you are part of the festival network employment program, that this is a short-term project for you. So you're not going to be there next year. So you're not going to have that relationship with the volunteers this year, next year. So there's going to be a whole new volunteer coordinator coming in. So you almost have to start all over again to build those relationships. So in situations where you have Blues Fest, as Anna said, you have a 95% return rate of area leaders. That's phenomenal. Those are relationship builders for sure. They're going to bring back the people that they met before, and they're going to build that network. And I would encourage all of you to do the same thing, is make sure that your people, your area leaders are the people. They really are. That they invest all of their energy into making the volunteer experience the absolute best that they can. Because in my capacity as a volunteer coordinator, I am there to help. That is my entire role. Yes, there's management. Yes, there's all kinds of other things that I have to do, but hopefully I've had all of those done before the event actually is being delivered. And then my entire life is dedicated to how can I help? And I would encourage any of you who are in this capacity to make sure that you really do get to know your volunteers, really get to know your volunteers. Spend time with them, put down your notebooks, get your feet on the ground, walk around, talk to them, listen to them, find out more about them. There are so many amazing skill sets embedded, as both Kathy and Anna commented on, that we can capitalize on. I have a program that I love. It's called Phone a Friend. So whenever we were dealing with volunteer shortages this year, I asked every volunteer that we had, I said, do you have a friend? And they all did. So I asked them all to bring a friend. So I said, phone a friend, bring a friend. And I was able to double my volunteer force by not having to go out and blast on Facebook and do all kinds of things like that. I just figured I'd take the more direct route and just say, could you just bring one person with you? And I automatically doubled the volunteer workforce. And I met a whole bunch of new people who hopefully I'll be able to keep for future events. By participating in a lot of different events, you get a lot of different perspectives. I would always encourage you to be a volunteer yourself and get a perspective from the ground up. It's nice to be a volunteer coordinator. It's nice to be a volunteer. It's nice to be an area leader. But one should always know what it's like to be on the receiving end of all of those positions before actually taking them on. I'm just going to close out. I don't have a lot of things to say because to me, it comes down to the most important thing, which is the volunteer, their experience, that they have a wonderful time, they feel safe, they feel secure, they feel involved, and they feel engaged. And I think if you just keep it simple and spend all your time with people who mean the most to us, you'll all do fine. So thank you.
Thank you.
Whew, 15 minutes, I did it.
Yes.
Great, thank you very much. So if you have questions, you can put your hand up if you'd like to ask via video, or you can put them in chat. Shannon and I will kind of keep an eye on the chat as well. Just to get us started, I'm wondering, because we still do have COVID, it's still part of our reality. Are there any accommodations that you've had to make volunteers more comfortable, to give them that security of coming back?
I can start that off. Absolutely. We've had situations where who have had volunteers who are somewhat hesitant but still want to be involved. So what we did was we placed them in areas where they were open, and we asked them how they felt about the placement that we'd given them. We gave them the information that they needed, and then it was their decision. So we did that which we could. We can't create a bubble, but we can create or offer an opportunity that might make it more viable for them.
Good. Shanice, hello.
Hello.
Good to see you.
Good to see you too. So Susan, I've got a question for you. Really appreciate hearing you mention the issue when it comes to people not being in the same role because it's a short term. Oftentimes we're in short-term positions, and I'm in that spot right now. I'm finishing my contract shortly and trying to prepare whoever the team next year will be as best as possible. And I'm wondering if you have any suggestions on how best to, whether that's like putting together a document or creating some sort of way to continue a level of communication after finishing a position so that whoever takes over for Capital Pride Inner Festival in a variety of roles, because we kind of do a little bit of everything, so that they actually feel prepared and don't feel like they're starting from scratch all over again.
Was that me? You were asking the question?
Yeah.
Was it? Okay. I was listening, but yeah, really good question. Because I was with the Animation Festival as their volunteer coordinator, and exactly that what you just asked of me is exactly the issue that we deal with. The best thing you can do is prepare a toolkit for them, an electronic toolkit, and basically give them the benefit of all of the things that you've learned and all of the secrets to your success. Because literally you two will probably never meet. But if you ever do have an opportunity, if you stay in the city of Ottawa and you do have a chance to go back and meet with that person, that's the greatest gift you can give. Because we all come into this particular environment a little bit blindsided. And it may also not be a person who is in a volunteer coordination role. This may be their first time, but they happen to have the skill sets that kind of lends towards it. So understanding how the database works, let them know who, if you have any issues, people issues, who they are, give them the information that they need so that they can just focus on learning the role that they're taking on. But creating a toolkit with all the form and put it in one place, make it easy.
Yeah.
All the things that they need so that when they sit down and somebody says, well, you need to send out the waiver. Oh, there it is. Okay, there's the waiver I need to, that's the greatest gift you can give. They're going to bring their own personality and their own skill set into it. So you can't tell them how to do it, but you sure as heck can give them the tools to build their own volunteer coordination role. Make sense?
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Oh, thanks for asking.
I'll just jump in quickly that the thing that really helped me when I started, and the thing I've just left behind as well, is that toolkit is in a timeline. So that when that person starts, they know like, oh, what do I actually have to start with? And they can read ahead to see what's coming, and don't be afraid to mark like this is a really heavy time in terms of workload, and so that they can also pace themselves through the role too. I think that the timeline really helps.
No, great feedback, Anna.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you so much.
Great. We have Chelsea's hand up if you'd like to ask your question.
Hi, thanks. Hi, everyone. I'm Chelsea. I am the General Manager for the Ottawa Fringe Festival. I just have two questions, frantically trying to type them out so that they sound more cohesive than they were in my brain, and it might not work. But my first question, I don't know who it's directly toward right now, but we're trying to make a concerted effort this year because, as it was mentioned, that volunteers are a vulnerable sector, and we have felt that quite intensely this year with it being our first time back in person as a festival and as the biggest theater festival in Ottawa. So we were very short-staffed, and we were also very short-staffed in terms of volunteers. And so what my question is we're going to be hiring for a lot of positions and recruiting a lot of volunteers this year. And what are some of the traits that you look for in an ideal applicant for volunteer coordinator roles and in volunteer supervisor roles?
Can I speak to that?
Absolutely.
Chelsea,
Thank you. Yes,
It's
please.
Kathy. So the first thing, a people person would be somebody that I would want because they're out facing to the staff, to the clients, and to your volunteers. The other thing, a person that's organized, because if you said that you had, you're short staffed and short on volunteers, organization is really important. And somebody, believe it or not, I look for somebody that might have somewhat of a network. They might be involved in other organizations in a volunteer capacity. They might have been working in various agencies. So they have a network so that if they don't have the answer to your question, they can search it out. They can call somebody, they can reach out to a network. OAVR or Pavro or other agencies, the festival network, there's people within that network as well that they can call. I mean, the three of us on the call today know how many people, like hundreds of people, that I would have no problem calling somebody up and saying, hey, can you tell me about your expertise is in that area? Does that help?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And then my next question is less cohesive because I got halfway through frantically trying to type it. In terms of volunteers, we also have an initiative that we are creating where we want volunteers to be able to learn skill sets that allow them to become employable workers with those skill sets in future festivals, either our own or in other places. And specifically what we are doing is targeting working with people that don't normally get those types of opportunities. So we are working and have a relationship with MICA, which is the Mental Illness Caregivers Association. And we onboard volunteers that suffer with mental illness as a part of their lives. So when we work with these volunteers, it requires additional training and things like that. But we are embarking on this for a new venture, and the intention is that these people get to gain skill sets in box office coordination, customer service, etc., and then they get to put it on their resume, perhaps with a letter of recommendation, and actually, apply it GCTC or become on our roster, et cetera, and have a bit of an opportunity for a career they may not have gotten to have. But because this is a new venture we haven't gotten to move forward with yet, is there any advice when it comes to working with volunteers that may have additional requirements in order to be set up for success? And with your expertise, how would you approach this type of a project?
I'll say something quickly. I know the others have something they want to say as well. I would pair them with an existing volunteer, so that they feel confident in meeting. They have a person there to ask a question to if they're unsure. And this person already has experience with your organization, so that they have like a buddy system.
Thank you.
Chelsea, I would lend a few words in that when you're dealing with individuals in this capacity, we're dealing with a very special population with very special requirements. And we always have to be cognizant that whomever we are working with, we have as much information on behavioral issues and so on and so forth. So that sometimes will dictate how you approach and what area that you put them in. So I think the more information you have about the individual, and also seek the guidance and information from their caregiver on what is probably the best. I think it's a team effort is what I'm trying to say. Before you take that next big step, which is probably one of the most generous things anyone can do for a population who is sorely misunderstood and has skill sets to offer. Congratulations on such a wonderful effort. But being that we are dealing with such a special population, make sure that you go into it informed and educated, and that you bring along the resources that are available. I know that if you are dealing with certain situations, there are organizations that you can avail yourself of. Try to create partnerships. See if you can bring more people in. You may find that you've tapped into another volunteer market you weren't even aware of. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would just echo what Sue said in terms of creating partnerships to ensure that you're well supported and that the program itself is well supported. So I think that we as volunteer coordinators often take on that caregiver role because we want to help, but the reality is that we are not equipped to handle the depths of some of those situations, but there are other organizations in the city that can provide that support. So having those resources on hand, creating those partnerships, and then ensuring that your program itself is flexible and open enough to the accessibility they require, which may mean also having someone there with them. So like Kathy said, partnering them with an existing volunteer, but also them having the ability to bring a companion with them. They might be on the sidelines and not need to be right there, but if the time comes where you need additional support, or that person needs additional support, you need to get you in from their shift, or to feel confident in their role or beginning their role, that you create that opportunity within the program.
Thank you. That's all very useful advice. I appreciate it. We are starting small with only 2 volunteers from the MICA organization. Yeah, so hopefully we can grow it, and I will keep all of this in mind. So I really appreciate you taking time to answer my questions.
Hey, I'll be watching. I'm anxious to see how this goes.
Thank you. We're starting early so that we have lots of time.
Okay, if I can help, call me. Call me.
Thank you. I will.
I had a quick question for maybe Anna, because she had mentioned conflict resolution and emergency preparedness. And, in those, in covering off those, 2 kind of pivotal areas, are you hiring somebody third party to come in and talk about those things? Did you, pay somebody to come in initially, and then you use sort of a general curriculum that you reuse every single year as far as that goes? How do you keep yourself up to date, in those areas, because they are really an integral part of, how you execute volunteerism in your organization?
Yeah, for sure. So with Blues Fest and City Folk, their emergency plan is reviewed annually. The full document is 140 pages long. And then there's a condensed version that gets shared with staff and area leaders, and then an even more condensed version that gets shared with the general volunteer base. So that 141-page document gets reviewed every year by our operations manager. And I was also I read through it every year to see if there were any changes that needed to be made based on, if your site changes or something like that. And then that condensed version, it's kind of that annual review process to go down the list. In terms of actually training people on that emergency preparedness, I always built a panel of experts. So the training session, whether it was in person or virtually, as it was this year, we are fortunate enough to have a former police officer and emergency planner, Mark Ford, works he's a board member of ours now, and he has volunteered for years to do kind of a scenario-based training where he would give specific scenarios, and then we would essentially discuss it as a group so that people could see how those decisions get made and how they get trickled down into actual action items. And then we would usually bring on our security, first aid, so that those experts were there to discuss, how would this scenario be handled and why are you being given the direction that you're being given? And I think that helps a broader understanding versus just like, here's action item A, B, C, D. It's like, oh, I'm in action item C because this is happening.
Right.
So found that quite effective to actually have that discussion as well as the documentation that goes along with it.
Thank you. And is any of this, conflict resolution and, emergency, is that tied to any insurance, obligations, like your in your insurance policies? Are they asking you to check off certain boxes to get different types of insurance, or is there a dotted line or a solid line to that part of it?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. I'm not sure if maybe someone else on the call might have some insight in that, and how that plays into seat as well with the city and in terms of what needs to be in place. And yeah, sorry that I can't speak to that.
Okay.
So looking at the time, we're at our hour. So in respect of your time, we'll end it here. If you do have any other questions you think of later, certainly email them to Jeanette or myself, and we'll try to get a hold of them for an answer for you. As well, less than a week is voting day. So if you haven't done so already, the Ottawa Arts Initiative has up on the YouTube a recording. So in the last e-news, we have a link to it. So you can see what the mayoral candidates are saying about arts and culture, and encourage you to have a view and go out and vote and think about arts and culture while we're doing it. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.